Well, team, I believe you've met Chase and Matt, who are part of the auction team. We're going to do a bit of a wrap up on the frustrations within the industry throughout the year, really. But again, we're doing this out of the right place so that people can listen and make sure that they're probably more open to certain different concepts. Again, we're going to go through the sequence of how we get an auction from a white label perspective. We're also going to go through the common objections and the themes that we see from agents. We're going to go through some of the frustrations when a home's been on the marketplace a long time, it's had several price reductions and an agent won't even respond to us. And a great deal of other fundamentals of when a property doesn't sell. What are the outcomes in that sense? We're going to take you through the positive outcomes that also come out of it and also the benefits to you using the process all the way through. Again, a really good interactive episode with the both of them. I really enjoyed it. But again, hopefully it helps sort of open your eyes to making sure that you're always open-minded to anything that comes your way. Welcome to Rethink Real Estate. My name is Ben Brady, and this is a real estate podcast aimed to deliver sales strategies, marketing tips, and business insights from industry experts and myself to build a listing-focused business for the future. Let's get into it. Well, folks, you've had Matt and Chase on the podcast previously, but you've never had them together. And we thought we'd wrap up 2025. I probably have said this already on another episode, but we're going to take the month of December off and a bit of January off from the podcast. So we wanted to wrap everything up. And now, just to give a bit of an introduction to what these two do for the Harcourts Auctions team, they are the ones that are at the coalface. They're the ones that reach out and speak to every single agent that has a listing on the marketplace over a particular days on market, particular price point within a particular market. They are the ones that are reaching out. They are the ones having the conversation to say, hey, auction, would look at that. Would you present it to your client? And we'll go through a little bit of a sequence of how all of this works. But today, why I've got them on is because I want them to give us an understanding of what are the biggest reluctances for agents to do this? What are some of the stupidest things we see people do? Like, I'm serious. Like, again, we're going to try and not be derogatory towards the industry, but it's hard not to be sometimes when you're in our situation where an agent is saying no and they need to do something to help their clients, but they just won't even listen to something different. So all in all, we have Chase. Now, I'm going to get this wrong because Chase's last name is a bit odd. Matt, so is yours, by the way.
Yeah, that's good.
We've got Chase Boruff.
Pretty good. It's pretty good.
Boruff, okay. And Matt Blethen.
There we go.
There you go. Okay. I have to admit, I didn't actually know how to say Matt's last name for, I don't know, probably the first 3 months of him working here until he actually put it on his voicemail and I got it for the first time. I'm like, oh, thank God, I know how to say it.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I heard his voicemail about a month and a half ago and I was like, I'm glad I don't actually say his last name because I would have said it wrong this entire time.
Now I need to point this out as well, is that I've got a funny Australian accent. Chase, obviously clearly from the South, okay, and Matt's the only normal American on this thing. However, he's running a full stash. Look at this thing. It's just hilarious. All right. So boys, let's start off here. Give me let's talk about how many okay, let's talk about sequence. I think that's probably the best place to start. Let's talk about sequence. So Chris will send out who everybody knows on the podcast because he's regularly on. Chris sends out emails, text messages, social media to agents that have had listings on the marketplace over a period of time to let them know that we can offer a solution to partner with them on, right? Then those people will respond via text, email, respond via social, and your responsibility is then to reach out to those people. Can we give everybody a bit of an idea of what is a typical response from an agent? Chase, I'll start with you, and how do you deal with that response most of the time? What is a typical response that you get? And again, it will depend on the messaging and whatever, but give me a generalization.
Yeah, I think the most common is fees. They want to know what are the fees. That's the first thing that I think the most common that comes up is what are your fees and how your fee structures, which is obviously a simple response there. And then I think the other is auctions in general. The auction, my client would never do an auction, or they're afraid of the auction word, more so just I think it's the word itself, but just the auction, they see auction and almost disregard anything in the message there. I think that's a common knee-jerk response that I get almost daily.
Great. And we're going to talk about how to combat this all later, but Matt, do you agree with that, or what are your typical responses?
Yeah, I'd say to add on to those as well, just like send an email or send information over, which is typically like the easiest way to tell you not to they don't really care that much. I feel like is the leading indicator if they're just like, I'll send an email over.
Yep.
But yeah, I'd say that's the general sentiment is from what Chase is saying is pretty spot on.
Right. Well, now we kind of get into being careful and treading lightly because, again, we deal with a great deal of agents that are great agents and that really get an understanding of that they really want to help their client out. They also want to use a process to help educate their client because their client might be a little bit bullheaded on price. You know, there's many, many different situations. But once they've sort of said, okay, I'm open to the idea, we get them on a Zoom call. You both typically do the first Zoom call with the agent, and then when they bring their client into the mix, I'll get involved, and then we do a presentation again around the auction process. And I would say once you get them into the arena, and this is where the frustration probably comes in from us, is that once you get them on a Zoom call, what do you think our conversion rate looks like? Because, you know, I know we monitor it a little bit, but I don't know the exact number. But I would say that once they are on the Zoom call, there's an 80% conversion ratio, right? Once you get them and their client on, it'd be 80%.
Yeah, that's fair. I'd say that's pretty spot on, actually.
Yeah. So there's no doubt that once people hear about it, they feel pretty comfortable with it. But guys, give me give me this, like, and again, you're going to have to forgive that we're probably speaking down on the industry a bit, but I think it's a little bit of a smack in the face because it fucking needs to be honest, is that what are the biggest pushbacks that make no sense whatsoever to you guys, that they won't even listen to you? Not to mention, we're not even going to speak about the 99% of people that don't even respond to an email, don't respond to a text message, anything at all. Now, keep in mind, that email and that text message has their property-specific details in the subject line and their specific address, and they still don't respond. And it's usually a general question, not really about auction in the beginning. So it makes you think how many people are actually getting responded to. But guys, give me the biggest reasons that people aren't doing this that sort of frustrate you to the extent, because I want to try and open up the veil of why people aren't doing it.
Yeah. I mean, the number one, Chase probably may have a different perspective, but the number one is my clients aren't interested. That's probably the number one response I see. It's like there's not a chance in hell that you even had a conversation with your clients or even know what our auction process is like. So those are ones typically you want to respond like, oh, are you familiar with our auction process? And they don't respond to that. It's mostly just like they see auction, they see they don't want to do it, seems like something else, and then they just don't ever go to their clients. Or that's the initial one, I feel like. Chase, you feel like that's the same one?
100%. And, it's so hard to get a response from that because, we're genuinely curious. Okay, I understand why you wouldn't, I kind of know why you're not interested because I know that perception, but give me some reasons why. And it's hard to get any kind of really feedback from agents when you respond. But when we do, I think the ones that, come back is my sellers set on a price. It's like, well, you've taken 3 or 4 price reductions. They're not set on price. They want a price, but they're not set on it. And it's that assumption that this is a different process. It's the same thing as a reduction, but it is, completely different.
Can I ask about this? Now that we've given people a bit of a lay of the land and sort of the responses that we get, how much is ego involved?
I would say almost all of it. And you're dealing with type A personalities, and that's where you try to address it is like, I get it. But that's the thing. It's like, this is not you, saying you can't do it. It's you being proactive and saying, hey, I need some help here. And this is a great tool to use.
Okay. Well, here we go. What are the downsides to an agent doing it?
I think they
like,
get
again,
you
guys talk about this all the time. Like, what are the downsides to an agent using it? And because that's the part that like sort of blows my mind is that there is no real downside apart from an answer around what the property is worth. So an agent can realize a bad investment of their time and the seller can realize that now it's not the time to sell it, as you were going to say, Matt, probably.
Yeah, I also think the number one thing that I hear from agents, or at least the number one pushback, is I think there's some fear, at least from some agents, that if they bring a process where they have to bring in a team to sell the property, it's almost like they can't do their job and it's going to look that way to the seller. But at the same time, on the flip,
is that valid? What do you think? Is that valid?
I would say it's okay in situations to need help.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And I would say there's more value bringing in a process that can at least get them an answer rather than just sitting there and waiting for something to happen.
Especially when they're not getting results at the time. It's different if you're getting results, but not getting results. There is no downside of bringing another process in to say, hey, let's at least take a look at this.
Well, there's a part of this, like looking at it from both sides, trying to put both hats on. And again, let's face it, is that this is a biased conversation. There's no doubt about that. But trying to look at it from both sides, I can see how having to bring in a team in order to provoke the marketplace might be a bit of a downside to an agent that, has sold them on being an expert in real estate. I get that. Like, I get that that's probably a difficult conversation, but I've often found that in a transaction that the more vulnerability that you show in the sense of that, hey, I was wrong on this, and I've actually gone and outsourced some help to do this because the primary thing here is to get you a result. And I think that that's great. But let's talk about the agent that is at 120 odd days on the marketplace when it should have been sold in 30 to 40. They've done a couple of price reductions. And as you said, Chase, there's no real downside here to doing this, is that they won't even explore the concept of the process, or they won't even explore the concept. They won't even have a conversation with us in any way, shape, or form. Do you think, and defending the agent community, do you think that it's because it's surrounded with so much noise that they don't buy into that?
I think it has something to do. I think the auction perception is always going to be the top reason someone has at least got their guard up to get going. But I think too, we'll never know the answer to this, but when an agent goes in for the listing presentation, whatever message they provided that seller, they feel like now I have to go back on that message because I was wrong. Whereas, as you said, it doesn't matter. You're wrong either way. So you're either going to lose the listing or say, hey, I was wrong. Let's try this, at least explore it, see if it might generate what we want.
Matt?
Yeah, I would say it's level of familiarity as well. To kind of add on to that, it's the fact that a price reduction, they're comfortable. They know, or they have somewhat of an idea what happens after a price reduction, or they think they know what happens after a price reduction rather than pursuing the auction process. And so they can kind of coach their clients through that better than having to coach their clients through a new process and having them understand what it looks like, the aggressive pricing, and then also the process as a whole.
Let's flip this because we're talking about people not knowing auction and their perception of auction. There is also a category of people. Now, I think this is a smaller category of person that says, oh, well, I know all about auctions. When, just to be clear on this, there is no realtor in all of the US that knows all about auctions. Like, just to be clear, it's actually one of the things that will get my blood boiling more than anything is when an agent tells me they know all about auction. It actually makes me fucking angry. So I guess that the part of all of that, when an agent tells you I know all about auctions, I've done auctions, which they definitely haven't done auctions the way we do auctions, is that I guess that those type of people that can't be taught anything, how do we get around that? Or is there any way to get around that?
Yeah, I think, and I guess just from my perspective, like there's probably like a couple of red flags that get raised as soon as they say they know auctions when reality is they don't. It one means that they're probably going to go back to their clients and try and pitch it on their own rather than using us to pitch it, considering we pitch it every day, which is just not the best way to get things to move forward from our experience.
Why is that not the best way, Matt?
We do this every single day and have a general understanding of how the process actually works. I think they have a general idea of how auctions work and we'll go back to them, but they don't know the intricacies of the value adds and all of those things that come along with the reserve auction process, I feel like. And then
I think that there's also a part of that as well, Matt, that they should use a third party so that then it's not them presenting something saying this is a great idea. It's then us presenting. If they don't like it, they just move us out of the equation. It hasn't done any damage to the relationship there.
Yeah.
And when they do it on their own and the seller comes back with some sticky questions that they don't know how to address, it gets shut down immediately instead of being able to address those in real time.
Yep. And I think that, so like if we were going to give anybody that is interested in this a bit of an idea of how to go back to their client and present this to get them onto the Zoom, do you think it's the attention span of most agents or that doesn't allow them to do that? Because if we think about, because we're going to get into the ideal agents to do auctions with us and where that works here shortly, but the good thing about that is that the good thing about a normal process, if we can fulfill the sequence of that process, it's usually a far, far better interaction. So, for example, Matt, you and I just did one in St. Pete, is that you did an agent presentation, you took her through the entire presentation, seemed to grasp it relatively, apart from, we'll talk about the whole marketing bullshit in a second, okay, is that then the next step of the process is then bring the seller in, do the same presentation of such, give them the full education of it, then to execute and move forward. So everybody has a full understanding of the ways that this works, good, bad, or indifferent, because that lack of understanding, Chase, tell me like the backlash that we get when an agent actually hasn't gone through that sequence, and we get lazy because on a daily basis, we just want to get a couple of wins and we just allow a random person, not a random person, somebody that you talk to an agent, they go, yeah, this is a great idea. We'll do a presentation. Oh, no. I get it. You send them the information. They go talk to their client. And the client's like, do whatever you want. And then we bring them on. They're the ones that kind of blow up in our face a lot of the time, right?
100%. And it's because of the general concept is there, but then they don't understand how the actual process works. So when we're getting lower offers, they don't understand that's part of the process, what we're trying to do. When we don't have, the activity we want, they don't understand why. They don't understand the pricing. There's all, it sounds good and it's easy on the front end, but like I said, it ends up biting on the back end because they really don't have an understanding of what we're trying to accomplish and what success looks like. Yes, we all want to sell it and get paid, but at the end of the day, if we don't, that's why I think that the beauty of our process is there's not a loss here. We're either going to get a number and sell it, or we're going to find out where things are at. And that's still a huge value add that you couldn't find traditionally.
Yeah, I think so. Because then there's this other part of it as well, is that, like you just said, and Matt, how many times have we experienced this before, is that an agent, gets 2 weeks into the process and it's like, well, what are you guys doing to sell the home? And it's like, no. This is a negotiation process, right?
Yeah. I think we use the stat all the time, the fact that it's like, I think it was actually like 90% of buyers in America originally saw their property through Redfin, Zillow, Trulia last year. And that came straight from NAR. So the reality is, yes, you can do additional marketing. That doesn't hurt. That's not going to have like a negative effect on the property. But like your Instagram post that had 300 people saw it is not the reason why the $2.5 million home got sold and went under contract. So it's the process is a really good negotiation tool to take advantage of the algorithms on those sites, but it's not necessarily this additional marketing or international buyers or all of these things that are coming around, when in reality, it really is
provoking the current market that is already there. And the thing that people like, and the reason I bring this up, and we'll dive into the marketing a little bit more right now, the word marketing is a made up concept within the real estate community. I've had very big rants on this podcast about this, but I'll give you an example of this, is that we've got a property, and we mentioned there was just a presentation that Matt and I got off, and the agent and the owner both asked us how we get a global reach. With all due respect, based on this property, there is not a global market for it. And even if we did have a full Rolodex of every global buyer that is above X amount of dollars, they still probably are not looking for a property in your location. We're going to take your property and we're going to cast the net wider in all of the normal medians. Okay, because your net is small at the moment in those medians, but we're going to cast it even wider. It's people don't grasp the fact that we're going to provoke the already existing market, because the existing market is where the buyers actually lie right now. They might be on the fringes of those markets as well that haven't seen it, and that's where we might get a little bit luckier. But it seems to be that, to me, the agents where we have the least amount of success and the process is not about property and it's not about seller. It's the ones that are trying to plug the gap of my seller's breathing down my neck and they want a result and I don't know what to do apart from another price reduction. And, I promised them marketing and realistically it's just on the MLS. Like, do you guys, what are your thoughts around that? The ones our problems come from are the plugging the gap, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's 100%. And the marketing is, when you really dive into anyone and start getting into the marketing, what are you doing marketing? Why do you think it's going to work? No one has an answer, because there's not an answer of that. I can speak from experience of seeing $125,000 marketing campaigns. And it's like you said too, that's going to get a guy in his penthouse to come look for a deal, but he's not going to pay market value. There's
a point there, Chase. I want you to dive into that deeper. What do you mean by the fact that it's going to get him to look, but it's not going to he's just looking for a deal?
Well, because that guy doesn't want to pay, in order to entice that buyer, he wants something that no one else has. He wants to come get he wants to buy something for a bargain price or get some good value, where that marketing is going to get that guy there. But once he finds out where things are at, or even in the process, once it gets past his number, there's no emotional there, because he knows it's not a deal anymore. It's getting close to value.
Matt, what are the characteristics of an agent where it goes really well? We've obviously established that they go through the normal sequence where, they get the presentation and get a decent understanding of it, understand that we're going to do something similar to their client to bring in on a professional level and uplift them for the factor of bringing them something new rather than just another price reduction. But then in the process itself, once it goes active, what makes a good agent in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's going to sound a little bit different, but it's almost, you can kind of tell off of an initial call. I think the number one agents that I've always found work the best are always the ones that are willing to give up some control to the process, which is like a hard thing for most people to do. But I think giving up control and being open to working together with the auction team are probably like two of the most important aspects, because of the fact of if we're working together, it's almost a two-headed approach. Whereas if it's just an agent and just a team working coinciding with each other, it doesn't necessarily work as well. I think it's the agents who understand, okay, I can use the team to my advantage as far as information, providing information to my seller so I don't have to be the bad guy. The auction team can be the bad guy. So I guess like giving the ability, lack of just giving up control, and then also just like the ability to understand, okay, I'll work together, work well with the auction team, or two of the leading indicators I feel like lead to success as far as the process is concerned. I don't know how Chase feels about that, but I'd say those are some good ones.
Yeah, and I think what you said too, it's the, and I don't know, the losing control. I feel like because they're still in full control. It's their whole show, but it's like you said, using us, because that's what you're doing. You're partnering with us to leverage the auction. This is what we always do. So it's like getting over that barrier of, these are all your leads. This is all your data. We're not taking any of this. We're literally using it to help us all get the results here. So, and having to reiterate of, hey, this is why you brought us in to give this information. Let us run these folks down, leverage the auction, and do what we're supposed to do. And when we don't get to do that, it looks like, well, the process didn't work. And it's like, well, no, the process wasn't ran properly.
Yeah, like I'm going to say basically the same thing that you both have said, probably in a similar way, or maybe a tiny bit different, in the sense that the agents that, and this is taboo and it doesn't sound right when I first say this, the agents that are not protecting their clients' expectations are the ones that I believe are the best auctions. And what I mean by that is that it's not that they're protecting, like the people, agents get really protective because, Chase, you said this at the beginning of this episode, we don't know what they've said to them when they were in the listing presentation. Oh, your home is worth $2.5 million, definitely. Right? So what they do is they believe they're helping the seller by protecting that expectation, whereas some of the best agents that we work with are the ones that are like, no, I've got that wrong. I want your help auction team to show them the market value. And yes, I've got it wrong. Or maybe they didn't promise in the beginning, but they just understand that this is a method in order to actually find real value and where the isolation point is in the market, the trend of what's happening. The ones that encourage all of the low offers to see ultimately where the pattern is in the real estate marketplace, to then present that pattern to the seller. Okay. And again, it's not so much, the words aren't protecting, it's maybe defending their own expectations that they gave to the seller so that they don't look bad. And in turn, the seller is the only one that loses. And that's what I want to circle back here to, because I want to circle back to this, is that there's a level of frustration amongst the three of us on a daily basis that I think that we've got to be careful of, because it's really justified and kind of fair that perfectly good strangers using a different process that anybody has ever heard of comes to you about your listing and goes, do this and put your reputation on the line. I get why people say no. That's fair enough, right, boys?
Yeah.
Yep. We get that, okay? But the problem is it not wanting to explore it at all when the only person that loses out is their client, their seller, the same person they're trying to protect. It's just a contradiction, isn't it?
Yeah. The number one thing, sorry to interrupt, Chase, but like, Ben, you and I have this conversation on probably a weekly basis. Like, the number one response that we'll get, or the one that pisses me off the most, is, we've had decent activity and we're hopeful for an offer. It's like, well, how are you going to go back to your client with hope? Is that like the strategy, or like, has there been any offers, or is it just people showing through the property? Because there's
just get on that wheel.
Like, okay, you're going to pay me a fee, obviously, at some point, but I'm really hoping something comes through.
Yeah, but that's like, if they get on that wheel, right? That they get on the wheel, and we've seen it a million times. We know the agents that they are, is that you get on the call and you're like, what? Like, you'll talk to the agent because they want you as the auction team on the call to talk to the client. But then before you talk to the client, they're like, okay, we've got to keep this upbeat. It's like, why? It's not upbeat.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not trying to smack them. I'm trying to be politely firm in the sense that, like, the ones that are just on that wheel of everything's going to be fine, everything's going to be fine, everything's going to be fine. Well, it's clearly not. Chase, your thoughts?
Well, I was going to say, I think especially we're hitting a time right now that a lot of agents haven't ever seen is, that run up of 2021, 22, 23, prices went crazy and now things are an unknown. You can't take what the property sold for down the street, 6 months, a year ago and use it as a comparable. So I think that going back to earlier, the point of agents right now that really understand and see our value, it's because, hey, they don't know where the market's at. No one knows where the market's at. And our process is a tool to keep the integrity of the property and find that value where no one else is. And like you said, they're not stuck on that value. They know, hey, we don't know where it's at, and let's try to find it.
Well, let's talk about the situations where, like, we genuinely drop the bidding to start froms to a level that is just unbelievable in some cases, and yet we still don't have anybody. Like that, it's also pretty hard for agents to grasp, certainly the seller as well. And I wouldn't know, actually, I don't think the seller as much, is that it's certainly hard for the agent to grasp that there is no one at the moment in that marketplace. Like, we had a situation in Dallas, and the agent, a complete gem, really good, but like the seller, in that situation, really got the understanding that there's no one in that marketplace at that particular price point. The agent was like, I just can't believe there's nobody. It's like, with all due respect, we dropped the bidding to start from $8 to $4 million and still got one showing. And it was by chance we got that showing. They didn't even really want to go see the house. That is just such an isolation over an 8-week period of time that marketplace is in some serious trouble if you need to sell. But if you don't, you're going to have to wait it out for a while. 100%. And I think that's the part of this, is that most people would see that as a fail. Let's talk about the so-called quote unquote fail, is that most people see that as a fail, right? But no, we see that as an answer. Like, I want to know, what do I got to do? Like, I want to know, I've got a property in Reno at the moment that I can't sell. I've auctioned it twice, okay? And I know right now I need to put a renter in that thing, otherwise I'm going to continue to bleed for so long. Like I just needed to know that really quickly, and I'm going to lose so much less money for knowing that, right? So that's the point in this. So Chase, let's talk about a situation that we've been going through recently, is that, seller is at X, before we take it through auction, they're at, let's just use round numbers here. I won't use the real numbers, is that they're at $999,000 listed traditionally. Then we take it through auction. We don't get the outcome that everyone's looking for. We don't sell it before auction. We don't sell it on the day, even though we had really good interest. We had lower offers, really educational purpose. That seller now prices the property based on the feedback at, let's call it $825, so a $75,000 reduction, which is a big reduction. And that property sells within a week and a half later to somebody that didn't come through the auction.
And that's what I think the beauty of what we're doing here is, a lot of those, and that's, I think, going back to a seller's concern is like, what if we don't sell it? Is this going to hurt my property's value? And the answer is on the front end, always no. But then, they got to see that, no, it actually doesn't, because there's a message for what we did. We found out where the market was. You took an adjustment and found, you're in a ballpark now. And then real buyers that come in, they don't care. You ask where you were, you tell them what we did. They want the property, they see value, and it's sold. So it's again, where it goes, you go through the ups and downs of not knowing where you're at, but then it's like, oh, we got answers and we got them really fast here.
Yep, that's right. Matt?
But I mean, also too, on the flip side, I think the number one, and we have this conversation all the time too, and I was speaking to an agent yesterday. She was like, well, what's the harm? And I was like, well, the reality is, she's like, is it harm? What's the harmful or downside of the auction process? And I argued, I said, at the end of the day, it's almost more harmful to stay listed traditionally at a price where you're getting no activity for 2-3 months, because you're wasting 2 or 3 months not getting any answers from the market. So yes, you could take an auction property and share the 15% of the time that it doesn't sell. You have to go back to the market at a traditional price so they can see the pricing history. But once again, at least you've gotten answers, or at least a decent understanding from the marketplace of where it's at, rather than just sitting on the market for 2 to 3 months listed traditionally at a price where you've had no activity.
Well, the one in Dallas. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, mate. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's a great example, because properties at that price point, they take longer to sell. It could be 500, 600 days, 2 years, whereas our process shows, hey, here's what it's at today. Now you can take it off and come back and keep the property integrity, the days off market low.
I think at that price point, Chase, in that rarefied market, that's probably a 6-month answer, maybe even 12-month answer of, in that small snapshot of window. It's probably pretty rare that there's another buyer at that price point that's going to come in within 6 to 12 months of you trying, right? So the situation that I was summing up, though, I think that I want to go back to that, is that $1 million listed traditionally didn't get a result, came back after auction at 825. The agent sometimes fundamentally thinks that, oh, well, that was a failure. And the seller's like, no, well, I had to accept less. Yes, but you would have, how long would you have taken to get from $1 million to 825 in a traditional time frame? Months. And that was able to get a result. And like, oh yeah, but the buyer didn't come from auction. Well, it did, because they probably would have gone and bought something else if you weren't priced at that level. Now they would have disappeared elsewhere because yours wouldn't have been a viable candidate for them because it didn't display value. And that's where I have another little bit of an issue with agents and usually not the sellers, but the agent that's like, oh no, the auction process didn't work. With all due respect, it got you that reduction. It got you into the marketplace for that time, right? Where do you think the disconnect is there for agents, guys? Because it makes a lot of sense to me. I'd like to think I'm rational. Yes, I'm a bit biased. There's no doubt about that. Okay, so are you two. But where do you think the disconnect is in that situation I just gave you?
I think it's very interesting because, and if you think about it, the value add of the auction process for most sellers and most agents when we sell it is the fact that they're not obligated to sell. But when it comes to actually getting interest in the marketplace and they decide not to take it with the value add of being in complete control the entire time, all of a sudden it's a fail. I think the disconnect comes to the fact of they don't see the auction process as using a significant price reduction to get an answer from the market. They just see it as some process that's on the side. And then when they go back to the marketplace at a more attractive price, this is now just, it's traditionally listed, when in reality, you just use the 3 to 4 week process to educate yourself and your sellers on the marketplace and then come back at a more competitive price. They don't see it that way. They see, okay, this is a failure. Now we have to drop the price, when in reality, they just got a solid price reduction out of the process.
Well, and Chase, I guess that the part of that Matt's saying and the example I give, we're pretty upfront about that in the presentation. Like, well, there's some situations maybe we could be a little bit more, onus on the fact that we need to probably give them better understanding of what if it doesn't sell and all of that type of stuff. But we dive into that relatively well in our presentation, and certainly more so now when it's more of a likely outcome, so that therefore there's no disappointment. But there is still on the back end, even though we've told them all about it, do you think it's because no one ever wants to think of the downside, or that can't happen to our property, or I don't know.
I think too, it's a lot of it goes back to what we were speaking earlier of, it's based off a fictional number. It's based off a list price that is completely irrelevant because the property is not selling. If it's not selling at that, it's not worth that at that time. So, and I think going back with all the market changing is they're stuck on this number because there are comps. Hey, this property sold for this, now it was a little bit time, a few months ago or in the past, but they are stuck on these numbers that are not real numbers. So therefore it feels like it's shortchanged them where we're at now. When in reality, we just show them today's market.
As we wrap up, learning from 2025, gentlemen. I know we've got our quarterly catch up, our sort of end of year catch up here coming up shortly, but give me a takeaway, give me something you both can do better, so it's on public record and I can use it against you later. That'd be wonderful.
I think going back to what we said up front right now, just being more upfront with everyone of expectations of what it looks like, and not necessarily the downside, but what does it look like if we don't sell this? So that way, if we don't, because to me, those are the situations that really, I know it's not a success and we sell it, but it really shows the value of what we're doing here. And I think being more upfront with that of, hey, we all want to sell this, but a success looks like finding a number here. And that's, I think being more upfront with that is something I can do for sure.
It's also like, to touch on that point, Chase, it's also like, it leads to me thinking of a question, is that when we're in the presentation with an agent and a seller, is it, this is a likely outcome that can happen towards the end of this. And we give that example, like we reduce the price, but then we do still get it sold and that average reduction gives us the answer. Would you agree that that is still a success? It's kind of like to understand if they're like, oh, well, that doesn't sound like successful. It's like, whoa, this is a red flag. You probably shouldn't do auction then. It's almost like that to save any of the backlashes. Like, again, don't get me wrong, it doesn't happen all the time. Like, we probably only have issues. Probably, I'd go as far as say 3 to 5% of the time there might be an issue with people perception of value. But that, I don't think that, I literally think that we could literally give them gold bullion and they still would think that it's not valuable. Like, I don't know. But
when the facts are, yeah. What property has gone back after the auction and got a higher price within a month or two? I've yet to see it.
And that's the thing, Chase, is that again, we've got to lean into the fact here as people that do this every day that our faith in this process is undeniable and unpalatable to normal people, because at the end of the day, the real statistic, if you look at it globally, is that 1% of properties have only ever sold for more after auction than what we have been ever able to get before on the day of auction. And again, you can take every auction that ever has existed. And don't get me wrong, there are certain situations that I go through very regularly. Like there was a podcast episode that we did with Rachel Ashley where, again, I don't want to harp on this too long, is because I need to get Matt leverage against Matt here shortly with a question as well. But I think that her situation is so prevalent to me about value, and people are like, oh, that's one situation. No, this is every situation. It is every situation. Do an auction, 75 groups of people through the door. I think we had 6 to 8 offers. I can't really remember the full numbers at the moment. They were all around. On auction day, I believe we got $1,360,000 with live bidding. Seller said no, put it on the marketplace at $1,450,000. Okay, on the marketplace for well in excess of 3 months after, with 3 or 4 price reductions from that number because he ended up having to sell at that point. Okay, even though he was telling us he didn't, he ended up having to accept $1,340,000. That is $20,000 more than we were able to give him on auction day, and that was 3 to 4 months later. Forget the holding costs or whatever it may be, but everyone's like, oh, that's one situation. As I said, no, again, that is every situation. That is what happens every time. But anyway, Matt, tell me, learning, what are you going to do differently coming into 2026?
I think for 2026, my main goal is to continue sourcing new business. I think towards the end of the year, I definitely got a little bit lackadaisical with the fact of I had a lot of returning agents every month. So I think continually sourcing new business, making sure I'm bringing in new agents every month on top of what already is in there would be good. I also think, as far as like piggybacking off what Chase was saying as well, being a little more discerning with the agents that do come through, because I feel like sometimes I know when I'm bringing an agent in if it's going to be a good fit for the process, and still trying to push them through just because it's new business. But I think it would protect the process and the integrity, or actually everyone's time as well, if it was a little bit more discerning with who's coming in. Are they open? Do they have the qualities that we typically can all identify in a relatively easy manner of like, okay, this is going to be a good agent. So,
and I'm encouraged by the amount of agents that are sending other agents while we're working and after working right now. I've never seen that in my time, 10 years of like, hey, so-and-so's going to reach out. They love what I'm doing. And I think that's really cool. And I think it really hits home what we're doing is like, hey, this is a process that agents like.
I think that's a good indication indeed. Well, gentlemen, so you've both got it on public record, is that I think you both are doing a phenomenal job. It's not an easy job to do on a daily basis, is try and convince people, like I said, perfectly good strangers, about a process that is very foreign to them, that typically wouldn't be used in a normal environment, but to find price discovery and in some way expose them for not knowing the price in their market. But those that are open to realizing that real estate is a very hard prediction, I think we have a good success with. But again, appreciate the job that both of you guys are doing. Keep up the good work, and we'll make the auction process a household process. I'd like to think that, let's do big, hairy, audacious goal for a second, like just a stupid goal, right? Okay, it might not be stupid. It's not stupid. So let's say that 100% of the real estate marketplace equates to I'm just going to, between 5 and 6 million transactions a year. Okay, so 10% of that marketplace is what? What is that? Is that 600? That's 600,000 transactions, say, roughly, between 5 and 600,000 transactions. Mm-hmm. It'd be pretty cool to get at least 2% of the US marketplace to be doing auctions, right?
That'd be pretty nice. We need a bigger team.
Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. Is that there's a part of this that sort of goes, there's a part of me that goes, I'd love all of those to be us. But I do think that people that copy you is the highest form of flattery. And I know that there's a great deal of other competitors that have zero interest in doing volume. They just want to get their paycheck and move on. But, funnily enough, I've seen a few, because that was something that we had in the early days of auction when we first built it here, was you get all these copycats. Also, I had like 4 people leave the company to go start their own auction business. They're not existent anymore. But the reality is that I think that is a good thing, that more people would do it, because it is validation that the process is certainly something that people see as value. So, 2% of the US market? Yeah?
I'm in. Let's do it. It's there. It's there for the taking.
That's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So about 75% of our audience hasn't liked, followed, or subscribed to our podcast. It would mean the world to us, and it would help this podcast more than you know to expand our reach if you were to like, follow, or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on. Thanks again.